All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to wait a few more minutes. We'll get started at 11:05 here.
And I've muted all my notifications.
Perfect.
That's one thing I have to remember to do.
Before you get your Slack pings. Happens to the best of us. While we wait for folks, I'll ask you some of my favorite rapid fire questions. What is your favorite micro kitchen snack at the office?
Cashews and pistachios. I stay away from all the sugary stuff or the chips because it's so addictive.
Yeah.
I pretend as if they don't exist. Go directly to that rack which has cashews and pistachios and pick one and come back.
I'm sure a lot of us wish we had that same discipline.
We're trying to actually revamp all of our offerings in the micro kitchen to make them healthier.
Do any of the employees have a vote or influence over what makes it into the kitchen?
It's work in progress. We'll get people there, and it has to come through awareness and education. It's not going to just happen overnight. They come and they don't see those snacks. So it's a journey that we are building on.
Yeah, that's fair. We used to have at Google and both the startup that I was working at, we used to have a snack request form. And every once in a while, we'd see everyone vote for the same snack. And it was always very funny to get those notifications. Awesome. We're going to give it 2 more minutes, folks, just for folks that are coming in. Hopefully everyone got their taxes done in time. We're not taking an hour back from a coveted tax day.
I guess if you haven't done it till now, you've asked for an extension.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I owed taxes, and every day I go and check, and like, why isn't the amount still taken out of my account? And I keep checking, are you sure? My husband doesn't like to do an e-filing, so he's like, I don't want to give them all my access to my account. So he still does it the traditional way. I'm like, okay.
That's fair. That's fair. Probably know more about taxes than you ever imagined you would, huh?
He was a tax consultant when I met him. So that is his job now.
Very cool. Webinar topic for another time, tools to support folks in tax and what build versus buy looks like for them. All right. I'll just wait 1 more minute for folks that are trickling in. Supriya, do you see an option to record on your end in the more?
I think I do. Give me a second. And where am I supposed to see it? I'm just trying to think.
It's in the more button.
I don't have a more button.
Should be right next to whiteboards. Or sorry, there's a record button just to the left of Q&A. In between share screen and Q&A.
Oh, yes. Okay. You want me to click record?
Yes, please.
All right.
All right. Well, it's 11:05, the moment we've all been waiting for. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate you all making time on this Monday morning. Just to get to know your host today, my name is Rani. I am the CEO and founder of Complete. We are a compensation tool for startups and high growth companies, helping them with everything from candidate comms, employee comms, merit cycles, leveling structures, everything you can think of when you think about that compensation operating system. So we like to describe ourselves as the arms and legs to the comp teams, which are usually one or two folks, sometimes a little bit more depending on the company. A little bit more on my background. I started my career in product and engineering. I was always the hiring manager that had a few too many questions when it came to compensation and promos and recruiting. But it really came from a place of wanting to see more diverse teams and just learned a lot more than I ever thought I would around compensation and recruiting. And so left Google, which was where I last was just about 3 years ago, actually, at this point, and went out on this journey of comp consulting to now founding my own compensation business. And we have had the great honor of collaborating with and partnering with Supriya and her team at Roblox for the past couple of years. So I'm very excited to give her the spotlight that she deserves today. The Roblox team has had a ton of thoughtful intention around their comp processes and programs. So today will be an enlightening conversation for all of us. And before I throw it over to Supriya to give us a little bit more context on herself and her background, just so you all know, I'm hoping to do maybe about 30 to 40 minutes of questions, some of which were requested when you all registered for the session. And then I want to keep the last 15 minutes as open Q&A. And that's really a great chance for you all to ask anything that might be top of mind for you all. All right. With that, Supriya, I'll throw it over to you. I'd love to hear, a quick background on yourself. We'll take it away from there.
Thank you, Rani. It's been a real pleasure working with you for the last few years and seeing your company grow. So a little bit about me. I did a little known fact about me. I did my degree in computer science and started my career in HRIS, building tools. And I don't even know when I navigated into compensation, but for the last 2+ decades, I've been doing compensation and benefits. And most recently, for the last 3 years at Roblox, and prior to that at Facebook, which I still cannot call Meta. My journey has been very interesting because it's been across different continents and different industries, from research, academia, to financial services, to technology. And what I've learned across all of these is that it's so important for any leader to be focused on efficiency, productivity, and growth. And in my last role, we were all tasked to read the growth mindset. And that kind of opened up more in terms of it's okay to be bold, it's okay to take risks, and it's okay to fail. So that is what I've been doing for the last 3 years at Roblox.
That's amazing. And I think a few of us have heard of that small startup called Facebook. So maybe we can relate to that company. Without bearing the lead here, Roblox has been commended for, associating words that aren't typically associated with compensation, like creativity, innovation, right, in every facet. And so I want to take a second to talk about what are you all doing that's special, different, and maybe you can just for the audience here today, give them a little bit more of a taste of what you all have been working on.
So when I'm going to kick it off by saying, when I was interviewing for this role over 3 years ago, I felt that what are they looking for in that next leader? And I was, until the latter part of my interview process, which was with the CEO, I did not understand that they were looking for somebody to be innovative. And when you think of innovative, you're thinking like, okay, comp has cash and equity. Okay, what are you thinking in terms of innovation? And that's when I got the lead from our CEO, how he's thinking about disrupting the world of comp. So in my first year, we launched a quarterly equity refresh system, which is, I think we are still the only company that does it. Which is based on your most recent performance rating. So instead of getting that full annual new hire grant at one price, you know your annual new hire grant, but you get it at 4 different price points. So it helps you dollar cost average any fluctuation in the stock market. Since then, we've not had any noise when it comes to the price went up, the price went down. People are, that's okay. The next grant will be higher or lower. And there's more resilience built into the system. We also have a very, for which I'm not going to take credit, we have a very unique performance management system, which doesn't look at typical ratings of, meets, exceeds 1 through 5, any of that. So are we saying it's a ratingless system? No, it's not a ratingless system, and it's not a rating system either. It's something different than both ratingless and rating system. It's a growth system, because we believe the aspect of performance is for you to drive growth, and drive growth for yourself and drive growth for the company. So our performance system is very innovative. And we also look at, we also revamped in the last year our promotion system to a progression system. So instead of waiting for having a plateau in your career where you are IC5 for such a long time and then wait for that big bump to get to IC6, we're like, that's not true when it comes to the reality of somebody's growth. People are not staying stagnant for 2 or 3 years and then growing all of a sudden overnight. People are continuously growing to that point. So given that they're continuously growing, why is our system focused on a one-time big job level promotion? Why aren't we focusing on ongoing progression? So we built out the progression points in our scale, and now where you had 10% or 5% of the company getting promotions, now you have a lot more getting progression and seeking validation that they are growing at the company. Mm-hmm. And not only that, we even tied it to a reward that comes with every progression. So I think these are some of the things that I have not done in 25 years, that I feel so honored to be able to do this at Roblox. And I'm going to give one last example, which is very near and dear to comp professionals, which is merit matrices. We love merit matrices, and we've spent our entire life, fine-tuning those merit matrices for optimal outcomes. I feel liberated saying that we do not use any merit matrices at Roblox, and ours is completely formulaic, 99.9% formulaic outcomes. And two people with the same level of growth and performance always end up at the same comp. So even though we do our customary pay equity analysis, it is, I know the outcome before we do it, that we are going to have absolute pay equity.
There are two threads in there that I'm sure the audience has questions about. So I'm automatically letting you all know we will save some time to talk about stakeholder management, because not every comp professional gets to talk about their CEO when it comes to their comp philosophy. So we'll definitely chat more about that. And second is, Supriya, you would know this better than most, any opportunity to be creative comes with a very high level of responsibility in education for managers, executives, board, even your comp committee, right? So we're going to, later on talk a little bit more about how you've been able to question the status quo and challenge some of these topics like merit matrices, both uplifting it, but then also putting a new system in place. So excited to continue the conversation. In terms of how I want to talk a little bit more about what we're all here to talk about, which is comp tools. And I'm sure a lot of you saw on LinkedIn, I was joking about comp tools being superpowers, right? How does this become something that allows our teams to be more performant, be more effective? Supriya, I want to tee you up to first just hear a little bit more about how have you thought about adoption and, even a former life of building tools? But second, how has that perception been different or similar during your time at Roblox?
So when I look back at my journey, tooling has always been inherent to anything we do in comp. And personally, I think we are at this point, at an inflection point in compensation, where I think we have absolutely maximized our usage of spreadsheets, whether you do it in Excel or whether you do it in Google Sheets. But that's a forward-looking conversation. When I look back, I think my journey of tool adoption or tool creation has started with, are we going to build or are we going to buy? Okay. And there are some principles that we attach to when would we build and when would we buy? For example, you would build when your needs are so niche that cannot be supported by external vendors. I know building is a lot more expensive, so we've got to be mindful when we go to build something. And you buy when you evaluate that what your needs can be met by or can be complemented by a product that already sits on the market. Of course, this is a very high level. For anything we do, we start with a set of principles as to what are going to be our first principles, and then we keep checking, are these the right principles, and are we adhering to these? And but what's more important to understand is what is the forcing function, okay? And for me, when I look at any tools, build or buy, the forcing function has always been efficiency, productivity, and then it goes hand in hand with scalability and growth. So basically, you start with focusing on what are the business needs, how is the business evolving, and how are the needs of the business evolving. Whatever tool you're going to buy or build, how is that going to support employee experience and collaboration with employees? And is it going to drive high performance, in terms of the tool performance and employees' performance? One of the questions we ask at the end of each performance cycle is, how much time did you spend on self-reflection? How much time did you spend on the comp cycle? How much time did we spend on calibrations? Because when you compare cycle over cycle, if you are spending less time and getting the same or higher productivity, the quality of reviews is getting better, and the time that you've spent is reducing, that in itself is evident that you're moving in the right direction. So all in all, it has to come from, each organization is different. When I was at Meta, it was all about building tools, because you have an army of technology people who are going to support. When I came here, there were some tools that we built, like, we did our advanced comp in our HRIS system. We did our comp module, but our performance module, because our performance system is so unique, we had to build it, and there's continual support to it. So keep in mind, when you're going to build, there has to be a very strong reason for you to build, because it is very expensive and you need continual support on it.
I love that you double click on continuous support, because we see a lot of our customers think about build decisions as, hey, we can allocate a few engineers for a 6-month time period, and that should get us pretty far to where we need to go. Any individual who's been working with these systems, whether it's a vendor or someone internally, knows you are going to have to make changes, and you want to be in a place where you want these systems to evolve with you.
And Rani, I'll add one more thing.
Yeah.
Which I missed saying. One thing is, compensation is a complex subject, okay? So anything that drives simplicity, I would say, whether it's buy or build, go adopt that, because people feel a lot more in any engagement survey. If any comp question comes up, of course, you don't ask the question, are you paid enough? But you ask the question, do you understand your compensation system or your compensation programs? And if majority of the people say yes, that's a huge win, because I can tell you, whether it's a new college grad or whether it's an executive, I get questions on a regular basis, say, how does this work? Because they're not in this world every day. So simplifying the communication of comp is key under any tool that you adopt.
Absolutely. Especially for a team like Roblox, where there are specific nuances, where if they were coming from a company like Meta or Facebook to Roblox, they actually do have to learn what these differences are to understand what their progression looks like. I want to double click on one aspect, which you just mentioned, Supriya, which is the complexity of compensation. And just taking a page out of my prior life, which was product management, we used to have this principle called the Uber principle. And it's named after Uber. I'll explain in a second why. Because every tool that teams adopt comes down to saving time, saving money, or convenience. It's one of the three. And oftentimes we see that our customers need to be encouraged to figure out which of those razors are most important to them. Are you trying to save money? Is it that you can't actually fund a 4-person team to help build the system? Is it that you have a new merit cycle you're trying to launch within the next 6 months? Or is it actually, this is just not what we want to be spending our time on. And that's the convenience factor. So it's named after Uber because if any of you all have called rideshare recently, if you look at the options in Uber, the first one is get me to my destination as fast as possible. You're saving time. Then there's usually some share option where you're saving money, and there's some Uber comfort option, which is, your own comfort and convenience. And so that's something that we think a lot about in the product world that I think actually very elegantly extends to compensation. You did mention some ground principles, Supriya, everything from company needs to scalability to even the amount of support you would get to adopt those tools. Just really quickly before we leave this topic, if you had to choose maybe two of those aspects that you've seen are maybe underinvested or under-researched in your experience, what would that be?
I think employee experience is key, and we often tend to build tools that simplify our lives. But is it necessarily simplifying our employees' lives? I think that is the first question I ask. Because an example, we created a massively great dashboard and put it out there. But understanding that dashboard can be, you really need to invest time in understanding the dashboard. So version 2 of that is it has to be so visual, absolutely visual, least amount of numbers, so people can just understand by looking at those charts as to what it means. So I think investing in employee experience is key. And support, which you mentioned, which we often forget when we are building tools. And then we realize that, oh my God, now we need three full-time people to support this tool. So while building feels very, very customized to your needs, and you feel really good about building a product, the irony there is you may not always get enough support, and that leads to a lot of angst. Whereas, so I guess it's a trade-off. You have to be sure that this is going to be supported in the long term before you go and build.
Mm-hmm. If I get a lot of questions about complete support and SLA as a follow-up to this webinar, now I know why. I do think it is a very important aspect to consider. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Shifting gears a little bit, we talked about how you think about build versus buy in the actual adoption of tools. I want to shift to how you think about the success of tools. And I think you've obviously seen this, and maybe if you want to take a second to talk about your team and the size of your team and how it's organized, but every comp team is continuously growing and thinking about new things. How do you think about what are the success metrics?
Sure.
What does it take to define what successful looks like for a tool?
Yeah. So I'll start off by sharing a little bit about the size of my team. Unconventionally, it is a larger than expected comp team. We are 3,000 people and we have 10 comp people, including me. Now, you may say that's a massively big comp team. 3,000 people, you should probably have 5 people. You're right. But just the three things that I talked to you about was, progression system, talking about our quarterly refresh grants, and continuously innovating on our comp strategy. You cannot do that with a lean size team. The size of team of 4 to 5 people would be ideal if you were in maintenance mode only. But we are not just building programs, we're building tools alongside with programs. And I was very clear that in order to succeed in this, we have to have the right skills. So not everybody on the team is a comp expert. We have some people who are more focused on analytics and some people who can code and some people who are pure comp people. So not only the size of the team, but the skill set on the team also has to be diverse. Because otherwise I cannot get, systems being rolled out or dashboards being built overnight. And now with Gen AI infusing, I have a few openings on the team and we're looking at even a different skill set than what we have today, because we're like, why do we want to add another person like us? Why don't we get somebody who teaches us or who does something completely different that none of us can do? So I think focus on the skills on the team. It's very natural for us to continuously ask for one backfill for another similar profile. So get out of that mode. And then when it comes to tracking and the success of these tools, I think tracking is a very important metric, and we are a very metrics driven organization. So for everything, in fact, few hours later, I have a metrics meeting. Once a month, we review our metrics for the team as to how are we doing against what we've set out for. So when you're implementing a tool, the way I look at it is yes, you are going to track, but what are you going to track? You need to establish very clear objectives from the beginning as to what does success look like when I'm going to build or implement this tool, okay? And then what are going to be my measures, my indicators, as they call KPI, I just call it measures, because you have to measure what does success look like. And then your objectives can be very varied. For some tools, the objective can be, I just want to enhance efficiency, data accuracy. It could be increasing employee engagement. It could be reducing administrative burden. It can be anything, but have very clear objectives when you start implementing a tool. And then you want to do a before and after, as to do a baseline assessment as to what is it today that we are spending time on, or what is it, do we have an accuracy problem? Do we have a efficiency problem? Do we have an administrative lag? What is it that we have today? And this baseline serves as a point of measuring the tool's impact and identifying even later, as you iterate on the tool, what are the improvements that you can bring. So once you set these, of course, this is not something that you're going to set and you're going to say, I'm never going to change it. You have to keep evolving. It's a living set of metrics, okay? And then once you've implemented the tool and you've run through, a reasonable amount of time to gather your metrics, then you do a quantitative assessment of the tool. So you are saying, okay, what was I before? What is it now? What's the error reduction? What are the productivity gains, whether it is in terms of cost savings or time savings? What is it? And you do a comparison of the pre-implementation and post-implementation. That's the quantitative part of it. But you should also seek feedback from users in terms of the qualitative aspect of it. The way we are a survey company, we survey people at least once a quarter. And just today we sent out a survey on something. We're continuously surveying our population and learning from them as to what's working, what's not working. I also do a little informal check-ins with people. Hey, you use this tool, based on utilization. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Sometimes in my one-on-ones, that's all I talk to them about, because it's good to have low agenda one-on-ones also with your business leaders. Yeah. And then the last two items I would say when it comes to measuring success are user adoption and engagement. If it is an optional tool that you put out there, for example, I was talking about a dashboard that we put out there for people. You want to go and see, this was optional, not mandatory. So people have a choice to go and get into it or not. And if your utilization is low, we all know how much energy it takes to put something out there. I mean, to me, that pains my heart that the team has put in so much effort and we're not getting utilization. So that's when you go and understand as to why are we not seeing utilization? Is it that, like in our case, the utilization was low because everything was in different places? For this, you have to go to a different place. For performance, you got to go to a different place. For comp, you got to go to a different place. So we realized, no, we got to get everything in that's why simplicity was something I focused on. We've got to get that simplicity and have it in one place under one roof for them. And so user adoption and engagement is key, especially when you're rolling out high value tools, but they're optional, okay? And lastly, depending upon the size of the company, you may want to seek external benchmarks also. Hey, should I be satisfied? Like when we do our 401k, I always ask, what is a typical participation and how is our participation in relation to that? So where possible, also gather some external benchmarks. That way, when you take your metrics to your leadership team, and we do end of quarter reviews for all our businesses and all our functions, including comp and benefits, that's where you say, hey, our metrics are this. These are some external benchmarks so that it doesn't come across like, you're totally off, or It doesn't mean you can't get better, but an external benchmark helps, ease the conversation if your metrics are not looking that great. But it doesn't give you an excuse to not improve on your metrics.
I appreciate you calling out where the manager dashboard had been, an optional tool, but you were still tracking metrics around utilization. Something we've encouraged a lot of our customers to also be more open to are pilots, because and feel free to comment on this too, Supriya, but I think there are a lot of times where folks enter a RFP or a search for a tool, whether even if build is one of the options they're considering, with very minimal awareness for where is the company today. And so a pilot can be a really good opportunity to just sniff test. Hey, where is utilization? Are there certain job families or departments where we're not seeing utilization? And does that have to do with the executives that we're working with, right? Is there more enablement or empowerment we need to do with the stakeholders? Or, is it an education problem? If we have time, we can talk a little bit about this too. But, something that, when we partnered with Roblox on the recruiting side, it was also just studying how does the level of comfort or confidence look like across folks that are using comp tools like Complete change over time? And does it make it easier for every new person that is joining the team? And so I do think pilots are a really effective strategy in terms of even figuring out what are the metrics that we need to be starting with before we start taking longitudinal goals around, okay, here's what we're going to get to in the first 12 months, here's what we get to in the next 24, so on and so forth. Anything you add?
I agree. And pilots can be very helpful. It also helps bringing stakeholders along in the journey. So, and I think that is one very important aspect in all the things that I talked about that we changed at Roblox. That would not have been possible without stakeholder alignment. And as easy as it sounds, I think that's one of the hardest things to do, because everybody in the room can have so many varied inputs, and you may not be able to align with everybody. So having some, ground principles, even to bring stakeholders along, is very important. And you have to be bold at times where you're going to say, well, I know I'm not in alignment with 2 out of the 10, but we are going to disagree and commit and move forward, because you cannot do everything, and you have to go with what is your most optimal solve for something versus the, this has to be perfect. If you wait for perfection, you're going to wait too long. So we kind of have to tell them, yeah, you're right. We can do this in this go around, but we'll put it on the roadmap for future, or we have to somehow figure out, and in some cases it's taken over a year for me to get people off their world where, it's a completely different solve that they're asking for. But I also understand that from an employee experience standpoint, it could be a disaster. So sometimes it takes a very long time to get leaders off of that and see the value in what you're giving versus what they're asking for. What they're asking for is great. It's just not easy to land. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So you need to go in small steps, and it's okay. You should continue conversations with those leaders. It's not about disagreeing with the philosophy. It's about channeling the philosophy for what's right for us today. This may be the right solve, but not today. We are not mature enough to have this solve yet.
Yeah. This is a great segue to stakeholder management. And, there's a whole can of worms of how do we actually get these tools and manage the case for buy-in and whatnot, which we'll touch on. But before we get to that, there is a very natural bifurcation of metrics depending on the different function you play within a company, right? Like I gave that example of recruiting where, they might be looking at candidate literacy when it comes to comp tools, or even offer closing, time to acceptance. HRBP teams are looking for speed or access to information. Most CTOs that we work with are looking for stats on regretted and unregretted attrition, right? So I'm curious, what are some of the metrics that you think about between some of these different stakeholders? And then we can talk more about how you get them on board to your worldview and perspective.
So all all the metrics you mentioned are metrics that we track. Offer acceptance, like I get into the offer acceptance dashboard every week. It is a standing thing on my calendar where I have marked 15 minutes every week to get into the offer acceptance dashboard, and all my CBPs are required to do it at least twice a week. Okay, because that's where you can start seeing the trends. And we're already starting to see trend shift from, that 80-90% acceptance to slightly, a slight dip now as we see, but it's nothing worrisome at this point. Okay. So I look at that every week. I look at our growth in terms of whenever we run our performance cycles, we showcase to our leaders, this is what the progression rate was in your organization. And we look across the company, are certain businesses having higher progression than others? If so, why? Is it a one-time thing? And we track it cycle over cycle, because it may be in this cycle they had a higher progression, but last 2 cycles they held back people. They were growing and nurturing talent. So don't base it just on one cycle. Of course, attrition, that goes without saying. But what I focus on when I look at any of this is, what are the reasons, not just the data as to, do we have high attrition or low attrition? Do we have low offer acceptance rate or high acceptance rate? What are the reasons for offer rejections? And is comp anywhere in the top 3? Are benefits anywhere in the top 3? And then, of course, the business looks at, is it the interest in the role, if that is. So we have like 8 or 10 reasons that we track.
Right.
We look at competing offers. So we have a whole database of competing offers where we can see, okay, who were our top competitors this quarter for our open jobs? And, did we win the bid? Did they win the bid? We have all that in our dashboard. So that's just on data related to hires and attrition. Outside of that, we of course track our comp metrics. We track, as every comp person, you're tracking dilution on a regular basis as to, you cannot be diluting the shareholders beyond a certain point. And if you start seeing a trend of higher dilution because of, if the stock price is not moving and you're continuing to make those grants, you have to have a very serious conversation with C-level and with your leaders as to, you can't do this. When you have to choose between one of the two. Dilution has to be maintained based on what we've told our investors. Okay, so that's a metric we track. And then I also track a metric which is called a cost per head versus what you would call revenue per head. So if your cost per, so you have it for the last 2 years, okay, because you know what your cost was and you know what your revenue was, and you have a plan for this year. If you're suddenly seeing that your cost per head is tracking much faster than your revenue per head, it is something you want to start flagging to leadership, because you really want to be mindful that you want to maintain a balanced ratio between how much each. We also track what is called contributions per head, that based on our revenue that we are driving, which we call bookings in our world, in terms of, it's a little different calculation, but whatever we are tracking, are we getting the same contribution per employee? Because if we are increasing the number of employees, the contribution per employee should also be going up. So a number of metrics, and as comp professionals, I feel it's very important to be like, tied to the hip with finance and continuously assess these metrics with finance to see if this was part of the plan. Are we seeing a trend that we should not be seeing? And doing it on a monthly rigor also helps you avoid any surprises later. So some of these metrics are very standard, in which we talked about, but like the cost per head and the contribution per employee is something we thought of to do here, because one of the reasons for that was all the offer acceptance metrics were taken by talent acquisition. The attrition metrics were taken by HRBPs. And we're like, so what are we tracking? We have a formulaic compensation. So I can't even talk in front of 100 people, setting. I cannot even talk about what was our average increase and because that can create a whole different level of information sharing. So we were like, so what can we track? And that's when we came up with these metrics. So sometimes it's a necessity that you have to come up with new metrics. And I think it's a very good metric to continuously track and to share with finance as to this is what we're seeing. If we start seeing an uptick, you catch it as, and you know the forecast for the year, then you can say, hey, is this how we should be hiring, or should we be hiring differently?
Yeah. I love that you call out both quantitative and qualitative data inputs, because I think it's always surprising for our customers too. I'll just add one quick anecdote here, which is, when you get to the offer stage of a process, a lot of folks expect, comp to be one of the top determinants of how they make the decision. Something we even reviewed with the Roblox team is the top two sections of a offer or total reward statement that is viewed or engaged with is first comp, but second is team. They look at who they'd be working with or who are they currently working with. And I think that's always surprising for comp teams, and actually, forges more of a marriage between finance, HR, and comp to figure out, why is that? And how can we all work together to see a little bit more participation in ways we wouldn't normally. So I love that you call that out. Also, I was surprised that you meet with your finance team monthly. I think that's probably the most
weekly.
Well, that's even more frequent of a cadence.
Every week we sometimes we drop the meeting if we don't have any agenda, but I would say three meetings out of 4 in a month we continue to keep them, because there's always so much value to being linked with your finance people, whether it's on dilution, whether it's on company growth. And the people who meet them are all on the pre-clearance list for any of our for trading. So those are the only people who meet with them. That way we get an insight as to how we navigate and how we shape our comp strategy as we move forward based on what our financial plans are.
Yeah. I've also found that finance teams have some of the best sources of longitudinal data. That might be my one tidbit or insight for today. Go talk to your finance person and see what they have in their reserve for you.
So I meet once a week with legal and once a week with finance. And that is so important for us to know how we are doing exec comp, what are we hearing from the street, all of that. As we prepare for earnings, what are we expecting? Is this going to, how do we need to prep to handle an upside, downside, whatever it is? How do we do that as a team, as a company, and not just wait for things to fall and then try to scramble?
Yeah. I want to bring this back to our overarching theme around comp tools, which, we talked about that. How do we decide buy versus build? We talked about how do we measure success? How do we actually help empower our stakeholders to come on this journey when we do want to choose a tool? And Supriya, it'd be great to hear from you, which folks you are collaborating with most, especially once you've identified the tool. But then second, what are some of the common questions you get or objections you've had to handle to get this buy-in if the whole team is maybe not on the same page?
Yeah. So getting stakeholders along is one of the hardest tasks, and it's the most important task. Otherwise, you're not going to build champions across the company. When we transitioned from to a progression system, from a typical promotion system, we transitioned to a progression system. We had to engage with several business leaders across the company, get their input. And now we've streamlined that process a little more. Coming out of that, we have what we call a people advisory committee, which consists of people from different parts of the business. And we talk about, so we have a standing, every other week meeting with them. But it starts with asking the leaders as to, hey, because it's very easy to get C-suite on board, since they're all in the same meetings, they all hear the same messaging, and they're generally more aligned than 50 other directors at the company. Okay. So, and they're also very high level when it comes to, looking at the problem. So it's a lot easier to get their buy-in. After we get their buy-in, then we ask them, since, we don't expect you to dive into every detail, nominate somebody from your team who can be your voice and bring back some decisions to you. And at the most, I've done 8 to 10 people, because anything more than that, there is so much noise in the room that you cannot even you cannot get to a meaningful point. Either some people are going to be very quiet because they are shy to speak, or some people are going to dominate the conversation. So 8 to 10 people is good. And we agree with, again, we first align with them on what are going to be the principles for any change. Okay. Once we align on the principles, then we go through some of the bigger decision making as to, okay, how do we want to do this? Do we want to, for example, if somebody, we have a progression system where you can progress or regress. So the question is, are you going to change their base salary when they regress, or are you just going to let them keep their base salary and change the total compensation? And while I'm not sharing the answers on this, but those are the kind of decisions that we need to make. And like I said in the past, you have to have a disagree and commit. Not everybody is going to align with that, but I think the leaders who are on this meeting with you are seasoned and mature enough to understand. And I generally, for those who disagree, I do a sidebar conversation with them to say, hey, I know you were not aligned with this. We want to move forward. How do you feel about us moving forward? And your idea is not going to be dismissed, but how about we, work on that idea after the first phase or in the second phase? So get that alignment with them. And the last thing to remember is everybody has a lot of tools fatigue right now. So whatever it is, simplicity should be a core principle in anything we do. So make it easy for the business, make it easy for the employee, and make it easy for yourself, of course. So this is how we work with our stakeholders and bring them along. And sometimes it takes months. So but your best outcome, the best outcome that I've landed on ever is when they are your champions and they are speaking in their teams as to how great the system is. Because you may be, even though we are 10 people, not all 10 of them are going to, as our comp business partners, there are 3 or 4 comp business partners. So they cannot be there everywhere in every meeting. So you need to build those champions who will be there to say, hey, we discussed this decision as a team. We brought back these decisions. We took your voice. Then they are very supportive. Utilization will be high. Doesn't mean you won't iterate. You'll come up with so many things that you want to iterate. And that's all what I call continuous improvement.
I am obsessed with this idea of ambassadors, and I'm absolutely going to share this with more customers because comp teams absolutely are very resource constrained, but I like this idea of having folks that are advocating for your core principles outside of meetings that you have. And so that really resonated with me. I want to challenge one thing here, which I'm sure a lot of folks are thinking, especially in this market, a lot of teams are thinking about consolidation. And, earlier we talked about this notion of speed, moving quickly, piloting, understanding what you don't know as quickly as possible. That feels like it's at odds with what we just described, which is, take a lot of time, bring your stakeholders along, fixate on, a long-term journey with them. How do you balance those two very different goals and motives?
So we do move fast.
At Roblox or past experiences.
So I will say, in my first year, before the end of my first year, we launched the quarterly equity refreshes. Then we did several other initiatives like progression, insights dashboard, and comp communications. There's a lot that we do. I think it's a misnomer to think that if you are going to invest time in bringing people along, you're going to slow down the process, maybe a little bit. But the speed that you get eventually in process adoption, that is made up by the investment in the beginning. So either you're going to put that investment of time upfront, or you're going to put that investment of time in handling issues that keep getting escalated. So you can launch early, but then handle escalations, or you can launch a little late and not have much escalation.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates because, something we see a lot with our customer base too is when you're adopting a tool, folks use that as an opportunity to share feedback completely unrelated to the tool that they're considering. Maybe it might be something that they didn't get to voice in another forum or just a core ideology difference. And so yeah, that does resonate. You're kind of paying down that stakeholder alignment. And it's actually not that connected to whether you're making a vendor decision or not at that point. It's, have you built the right advocates for your compensation team and
And
philosophy?
I say this to my kids also, you invest a lot more time in your education early on. You're going to not have to, do the same amount of your life gets easier after that. So I use the same methodology. You invest time early on, it gets easier. And then you have less. It is a lot harder, I will tell you, to handle a backlash than handling all the issues up front.
Absolutely. It becomes a lot more reactive, and that generally comes with heightened emotions as well. So hear you on that. I do want to open it up for, questions from the rest of the audience here. I just have one last question for you, and I like to end all our webinars with this, Supriya. There's so much is changing in HR, but compensation and the space more broadly. What is your one piece of advice for someone who's in total rewards today?
My one piece of advice is prioritize continuous learning, network with comp professionals in your area, or these days you can network from anywhere in the world. One thing which I used to be very worried about earlier, which I've overcome that fear, is, hey, if I engage with a vendor, they're going to bombard me with emails. I've gotten over that now. And I think engaging with vendors and experts is the best thing you can do, because you get completely new perspectives. And, honestly, my experience with vendors that I have not signed up with also has been great, because they are very respectful and they want to maintain a good relationship, whether it's now or whether it's next year. So they're not bombarding you with emails. They'll probably bombard you with more emails if you don't engage with them. So just continuous learning is absolutely important. And don't get yourself in a shell that I'm doing everything that's required to get my job done fantastic. No, get out there, network with externals, whether it is industry events, whether it is vendors, whether it is industry experts, and learn from them. Bring back those learnings and then try to channelize those learnings. I went to a conference recently, and as you know, every conference agenda has now changed to AI and Gen AI. And I came back with a lot of motivation, and I'm like, okay, how are we going to infuse AI and Gen AI in compensation? So bring those learnings back and push them, share them with the team, motivate the team to write white papers, even if it is preliminary, write white papers, because the more you write, the more you learn.
Thank you, Supriya. I'm going to pause this here. Happy to take any questions from the audience here. Feel free to type in the chat. You can also unmute and introduce yourself and ask a question.
Thank you, Bev. I'm glad you stayed through the session.
Any questions, folks? Can be related to something we discussed today.
Logan.
Hi, Ronnie. Hi, Supriya.
Oh, I see you. Hey.
Thank you for the discussion. Really enjoyed hearing all your thoughts. My question is around, I really liked how you talked about simplicity being like a core value, whether it's when you're evaluating tools, regardless of buy versus build, with employee compensation and compensation in general being very complex and constantly changing. I'm just curious what one area is you wish that the average employee had more information around or understood about your team that they maybe don't now.
So I would like, and especially the progression system is new. People have not experienced this anywhere where they have worked. So my biggest winning factor would be if all our employees understood, or at least 80% or more of our employees understood how progression works at Roblox, and how comfortable they are in sharing this. If they have to share it with one of their new team members, how comfortable they are with sharing it. So become a champion for the compensation team. The day I have that, I would say it's a huge success to our comp team.
Great question and great response.
Hey, Supriya, Kelsey here from Duolingo. On the theme of like communicating to your employees, what maybe like what are the different venues that you've used? Do you leverage an internal wiki page? Do you do like one pagers? Like how do you go about teaching your employees? What kind of like resources do you provide them to help them? Because my experience with our employees is very short attention spans and or just like capacity to retain information. So, we're trying to think, do we need to do a presentation? Do we need to do, I don't know, get creative and do small videos? Like, can you shed light on any of that?
Kelsey, you have touched a very, very important thing that I cannot say we've solved completely, because we're all trying to solve for this. So let me start with what we do right now. We put it on our Confluence page, internal, site. We do training sessions, the usual in-person training sessions. We do office hours. We do FAQs. We do small videos. But I'll still tell you that I don't feel all of that is reaching where it should. There's so much energy spent in doing all of that, but it's not landing. Not everybody can say that I attended this and I understood. Those who attend definitely understand. Okay, but those who are relying on reading it or on just watching a video, again, video usage is not as high as I had expected. I'll just tell you that. So it takes us so much time to build a video and then the usage is not great. So the way we are looking at this, not just for comp, for everything, is maybe we need to think of it like how marketing thinks of doing their communications. And again, I haven't solved it, but what we are trying to do is see if we can get help from our marketing teams or a UI UX person whose job is just to make that interface so easy to understand so that the most complex topics can be done in a simplified way. The other day, I was talking to my boss about this, and he also recommended some visual analytics pages to me, saying that, hey, if you run even your dashboards, if you run them through places like this visual analytics, one of them is called, I think, visual analytics. One of them is called observable, which we still have to learn how to play around in that. But there are some tools there which we have to get comfortable with. We probably need to take an unconventional approach from everything that we do versus, something new, and try to simplify that. And the way I see simplification is on your first page itself, they should understand things, and then they can drill down and click further if they have any more things. So we're trying a different approach this time as we bring more innovation. So I can definitely circle back with you and tell you later if that has worked or not. But that is an ongoing struggle that nobody wants to read. Nobody wants to listen, but they want the answers.
I'll just quickly tag on one thing there, Kelsey, and I find it, it's exciting that you asked this question because I feel Duolingo does a great job of this, which is there's a stat that 10% of what you hear, you retain, 20% of what you see, you retain, 40% of what you watch, you retain. The highest percentage of what you retain is what you can teach. If you can allow people to teach your comp philosophy for you, they have the highest likelihood of actually retaining that information. And what I mean by that is something we explore with Complete quite a bit is actually modeling. Hey, instead of just telling you what our equity refresh is, let's give you a way of playing with it and model out 6 equity refresh events versus 15. Again, all hypothetical, but putting that onus back in the hands of the employee or the manager in a way that they can actually start to see how different inputs are changing what the comp philosophy or comp structure is. So definitely making sure folks feel like they can teach on your behalf would be like one quick piece there.
Awesome. I really like that.
Thank you both.
I think there's a question in the chat from Hema. I'm interested to know your transition from Meta and Accenture to Roblox. How did your strategy for total rewards have to adapt to the different company cultures and scales? So I'm going to do a short answer to this, Hema. The short answer to this is just the way you learn how to scale up, you have to learn how to scale down. So when I went to Accenture and Meta, they already had very ingrained comp strategies and philosophies. So all you were doing is moving, it incrementally. When I came to Roblox, it was a white slate. So I had the opportunity to actually put the philosophy, put the strategy in place, and then build it from there. And I see your second question is on sales compensation models. We've built our own model, so I really don't. As long as I've been in comp, I've touched sales comp for a very short time of my life. So I will claim that I'm not a sales comp expert, but we have put in our own program at this point.
Amazing. All right, we're just at time, everyone. Thanks, Seema. Good to see you again. All right, thanks, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I will follow up with the link to this recording. If you all have any questions or want to get in touch with myself or Supriya, also put our LinkedIn's. But Supriya, thank you so much for your time today. It was awesome to learn a little bit more about your experiences.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Bye.